Okay, good afternoon, everybody. Our project's team is an assessment, or our project is an assessment of Venice's dependence on tourism. I am Benjamin Smola.
I'm Ian Blanchett.
And I'm Andrew Bissig.
So the historical city has fluctuated significantly throughout the years. Major highlights you can make are a series of plagues throughout the historical city. However, the city has always recovered from these plagues, where you can see major rebounds after each plague. But after World War II, there has been no sign of rebounding. The population in the historic city in 1951 was 174,000 residents. But as you can see in recent years and today's population, the population is lower than 48,000, or lower than 49,000. And the question is, will this population rebound? Meanwhile, the tourism has been growing and monopolizing the economy. The main reason population is declining is due to a lack of economic diversity. And relating to economic diversity is a lack of job diversity in the city. Economic diversity can be shown through the demonstration of COVID and the fragility of the economy during COVID. A major highlight is in 2020, there was an 8% decrease in the GDP of the Veneto region. This shows that a more diverse economy is desirable for the historic city. What we're trying to figure out is if Venice itself and the economy is becoming more or less diverse over time. And diverse is relating more into economy, in which we used street-facing stores as a proxy for the economy.
So, as Exhibit has already said, WPI has been collecting data on shops since 2004. And so the data that has been collected on these shops includes the location of these stores for latitude and longitude, which helps the shop's app, the application that shows all of the stores. It helps it show the map. It has the name of all the stores, the building number, the address, the siestere, the year the data was collected, the type and category. The type of store is what the store sells, and the category is a overarching category that includes multiple types within it. For example, restaurants and bars are one overall category, which includes restaurants and bars. Whether or not this location has changed, what kind of store it is from the year prior, and its tourist focus. We obtained our data set by combining the 2004 and 2022 data, in which we compared the two to find the overlapping addresses, in which we found about 2,700 addresses that overlapped. And the way that the touristicity classification works is there were 3 classifications of resident, mixed, and tourist, and they were based purely off of shop type in the past. For example, a resident goes to a hardware store. So all hardware stores were considered resident. And all souvenir shops, where only tourists will go, is considered tourist locations. But where it comes to mixed, restaurants, for example, can be either resident or tourist, or somewhere in the middle. So what we did is we added 2 more classifications of mostly resident and mostly tourist. And then we manually reclassified all 2,700 addresses. We manually reclassified 2,700 addresses for a total of 5,400 total entries reclassified. And this is how we reclassified them. We would look at a picture and what type of store it is. So we looked at this one, for example, is a hardware store where they sell stuff that only a resident would need. So this was a completely resident-focused location. And this store, when we looked at the picture, was a souvenir shop. It sells glass and masks, so it would be a 100% tourist business. After we took these classifications, we were able to put them in a map where we show all 5 points on here within the different colors. And from that, we were able to create more maps, which shows all the different classifications, including closed. Notably here, closed stores over the 18-year period has increased by 90 stores. Resident-focused stores have dropped by almost half. Mostly resident stores have also had a dramatic decrease. Mixed stores have gone up by roughly 10%. Mostly tourist stores have gone up, and tourist-focused stores have gone up by not a as significant margin.
So using these maps, we were able to make a major comparison, and you can see the change in flow of each classification from 2004 to 2022. Major things to see is that the tourist level in 2004 related to 2022 has taken a major increase, as in 2004, resident-focused stores have taken a major decrease. These were things that we wanted to highlight, along with closed stores having a major increase as well. Looking more deep into the maps, we were able to see the change in flow of certain stores. So in 2004, there was 354 resident stores that changed, and in 2022, there was 135 closed stores, 125 tourist stores, and 94 mixed stores. We did this same focus for tourist stores to see their change over time from 2004 to 2022, where there was 222 tourist stores, going to 124 closed, 40 resident, and 58 mixed. And we saw the change in closed stores, where there was 119 closed stores that changed, in which there was 49 tourist stores, 35 resident, and 35 mixed. We use this to create a comparison of businesses, in which Andrew discussed earlier, the business by type. So we talked about the classifications for each of them, and we were able to highlight from 2004 to 2022 the major increases in businesses, where the green shows the business that increases over time versus the red that shows businesses that decrease. This is more relevant when talking about resident businesses and stores that focus on residents, where you can see the red signifying that this business has decreased over time versus only household goods has been a store that has increased. Oh, my bad.
And when we're talking about all of this, we can see over here the broad comparisons once again. We want to figure out how focused the city was on tourism in each of these years. We used these manually reclassified data points to determine that. As an example, if we look at all of the tourist-focused stores from 2004, of which there are 608, we can multiply that by the weight of 100% tourist focus, since these are all the tourist stores, divided out by the total number of stores in that year. And after doing that for all 5 of these classifications, we found that 2004 had about a 55% focus on tourism. You can see that 2022 had about a 62%. That means we saw about a 7% increase between the 2 years, which is a fairly significant margin, given the relatively short amount of time between them. But there's more to this story. Looking at the number of businesses isn't enough. If we're going to do economic estimates, we need economic data. So what data did we decide to use? Well, we found the cost of doing business, which for our purposes means the cost of their expenses. It's how much money they'd need to make to stay open. In order to estimate this cost of doing business, which we'll be calling CODB for the rest of this, we need to take a few broad steps. Firstly, we have to organize all of our financial data. Our financial data came in one of 2 forms, either the rent and the wages seen over here in a table, or a given flat value, which is how much the business spent on their expenses, exactly what we're looking for. We got 86 financial data points from this table and 30 from billing sheets like this. The way we decided to organize all this data once we compiled it together was by the ATECO codes. These are the government-level classifications for businesses. It tells you what kind of business it is when you're doing billing sheets like that. As an example, this business here, 47, 24, 20. The 47 is the broad category, which in this case is just retail trade. The 24 is the subcategory, which in this case refers to retail trade of food products, and then more specifically of breads and confectionaries. And the 20 on the end is the exact store type, which in this case refers to confectionaries, aka a bakery. Our second step was to group all this data broadly so that we could work with it more easily and get better estimates. An example of how we would group that is using these stores. You can see we have 47, 78, 20, 32, and 99. The 20 is a photo and camera store. The 32 is for a craft store. And the 99 is just other non-food retail. For our purposes, these stores can all be considered miscellaneous retail, which is what 4778 means on its own. Our third step was to estimate this CODB per group of businesses now that we have it. As an example, we'll see the glass stores that we had. We had financial data for 4 stores that were considered glass stores. Now, a blank box here refers to €0. They had no spending on that expense. A business that had no spending on wages had no employees. There was only one person working there, so their wage is just any profit that the business makes. A blank in rent means that they own their building. They don't pay a rent or mortgage to anyone. This is most common for artisans who've been in the same place for a very long time. The calculation for this, also fairly simple. It's either the wages plus the rent multiplied by their tax rate, which would be a universal 22%, or just the given value that we already have. Just as an example, for this top store, it would be the $12,000 from wages plus the $8,000 from rent, multiplied by that 22% tax rate to get the CODB of about €26,000. Alternatively, for this last glass store, we have the value already. It's about $11,000. And our last step is to find the overall CODB for all of these stores that we have. The way we did this is by taking a look at all of the types we're considering, listing them all out next to each other, as well as the number of financial data points we have for each. Looking at the CODB for one store of each of those business types, in this case 31 and 14,000. Then from our manually reclassified data, we looked at the average tourist focus of that type of store. In this case, glass was about 81% tourist focus. Next up, very simply, multiply it by the number of stores we have of that type. And that can help you find the theoretical amount you'd need in euros from both tourists and from residents for that store. The value we got out the other side for 2022 for the amount of money that all of these stores would need to make from tourists in order to remain open is about 111 million euros per year. And this was across about 2,670 stores. Italy overall has a tourist dependence of about 11%. The economic income from tourists makes up about 11% of Italy's total economy. We found that Venice was about 62% dependent on tourism by this data, almost 6 times the dependence. All that means is that the tourist dependence of Venetian stores is at least 62%. And why do I say at least? I thought we had the exact number. Well, there's one major player that we didn't have direct financial data for, which is hotels. We had about 388 hotels in our data set. They are obviously 100% tourist focused, as I think we can all agree, but we had no data for them. So can we just not include them? No, we just have to make a broader estimate. In this case, we decided to use the same CODB per store as for a restaurant or a bar. And we did this because we're assuming that hotels are spending at least as much, if not more, than a restaurant would be on their expenses every year. And you can see as well, they have a much higher tourist focus, being 100% instead of not 100%. With these hotels estimates in there, we were able to calculate a new CODB of about 169 million euro per year, and a new tourist dependence of about 71%, which is significantly higher again. But what conclusions can we draw from all this data? This is a lot of numbers and not a lot of conclusions. Well, Venetian stores we now know are at least 71% dependent on tourism. Again, these are more of a floor estimate. If a hotel is spending more than a restaurant on average, this number will go up further. And we've noticed that due to the increase in tourist focus, Venice is getting more dependent on tourism over time, which means population is going to continue to decrease as tourism monopolizes the economy further and further, and job diversity goes down more. We do have some recommendations for future groups, since we weren't able to cover everything we wanted to in our fairly limited amount of time with this project. Firstly, reclassify more stores. Go through more stores manually using this 5-point scale and get more data. A broader data set is always good for making estimates like this, and with the amount of stores that WPI and the VPC have cataloged over the years, you could get a great estimate. And secondly, get more financial data. Now, our financial data covered about 3,059 out of the 5,200 stores in the overall data set in the Shops app, as we were discussing earlier. This is all the data that the VPC has collected about these stores. This is about 60%. Not bad, but we had to estimate for 388 hotels. We didn't have financial data for it at all. And we had to group things in order to be able to use more of our data. They were logical groupings, but you lose specificity by doing that. And lastly, we were only able to use 59 of those financial data points, which we had to extrapolate to over 3,000 stores, which is a pretty major extrapolation, and you lose a lot of accuracy. Reducing extrapolation and increasing accuracy should be one of the primary focuses of any future teams, be it through the VPC or otherwise, that are hoping to do a similar project to ours. Thank you very much. Any questions?